You are listening to the Drink Less Lifestyle podcast with Dr. Sherry Price, episode number 124.
Welcome to Drink Less Lifestyle, a podcast for successful women who want to change their relationship with alcohol. If you want to drink less, feel healthier, and start loving life again, you're in the right place. Please remember that the information in this podcast does not constitute medical advice. Now, here's your host, Dr. Sherry Price.
Well, hello, my beautiful friends. Today, I have a special podcast episode for you. On this episode, I'm going to coach a woman who I met through the free and private Facebook page that I have, the Stop the Overdrinking Habit. We were dialoguing there as I was asking what ideas people wanted to hear on the podcast. And one of the issues that came up was drinking because of parenting. She was talking about having a full-time job and then coming home to two little ones and them not listening and sometimes fighting and just creating chaos, and her temper would go up and she would start yelling, and then that was not the mother that she wanted to be. And so she would turn to drinking for relief. So I brought her on the podcast so you can see what coaching is like and how helpful it is to get really clear on the stories that we're telling ourselves. You'll notice that as I'm coaching her, we are getting really specific about what she's thinking, about what she's feeling, and about how she's acting. And she's not acting in congruence with her values and how she wants to show up as a mother. And so you'll see how we transition into that and then the tools to help that will get her out of this pattern of thinking, feeling, and acting. And I love this topic so much is because I believe that so many of us face this, right? This is real life. This is like I have a work life, I have a home life. I'm trying to make it all work and do the best that I can without needing to rely on drinking to help us. So have a listen to this coaching and see what learnings you can apply to your life. Well, hello, Alli. I am so excited that you came on the show. And as we get into the coaching that we will, I just want our listeners to know like a little bit about you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I work in the medical field and I have a very demanding job where I'm working for 24 hours straight or more sometimes. I am married and have two young kids that are 5 and 8 years old, and overall have a great life, but just have struggled like everyone else.
Yeah, very common. Thank you for that lovely introduction and your two little kids. I remember when my daughter was small, and it's just a lot. It's a lot to be full-time or more employed and raising kids and feeling like you have to do it all. I'm sure that's kind of what's going on, or maybe what's leading to your drinking. So let's just start there. I was just going to ask, like, what do you think is leading to your drinking?
Yeah, I feel like from listening to your podcast that I have been able to significantly reduce it. And I never felt like you said, like, I never felt like I was an alcoholic or had an addiction, but just that I had created this habit of like wanting to drink all the time. And so I was able to stop at any point and not drink on any given day. But it was like my brain was constantly telling me to, that I wanted a drink. And so it'd be this constant internal battle of just wanting to drink, but not letting myself. And so I just got so tired of that internal chatter all day, to the point it was getting to all day, every day. And so I think it's just a lot of stresses in my life with, like you said, being a full-time working mom. And, at work, I feel like I stay calm and patient, but then I get home and I have to deal with kids, fighting and whining and bickering and, not listening and having to yell, which I'm not used to doing. And so it's just very overwhelming at times.
Yeah. And so when is it that you pour your first drink?
Usually either, like at dinner when we're sitting down to eat, or, sometimes like on the weekends with the kids, like, halfway through the day when they're just getting to the best of me.
Yeah. And when you say they're getting to the best of you, what does that look like? What's going on inside of you when they're getting to the best of you?
I guess I feel like I'm like losing control of the situation or them. Like I'm trying to stay calm, but they're like fighting over a toy or yelling at each other. And I'm telling them, to calm down or to do this or that, but they won't do it until I start to raise my voice. And then I start raising my voice and then I feel bad and I don't want to be yelling. And so then I try to think of other ways to punish them or, discipline them, and it doesn't work. And so at that point, I feel like I'm just signing out, just saying, just let them do whatever they're going to do because I can't get control of the situation.
Mm, I find that's huge. I find a lot of people in healthcare, right? We're so good in our daily jobs, whether that's in hospital or for me in a pharmacy sometimes, or hospital when I used to work in hospital. It's like we can kind of control the chaos, but when it comes to our house, it feels like, I don't know, we lost the skill of controlling it. And then we also lose the skill of like managing our emotions, which we are so good at it at work, but somehow I fell apart at home. It's like, wait a second, I would never yell at my patients the way I'm yelling at my kids, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes. And so it's kind of like, I feel, and tell me how you feel about this. It's kind of like, I wouldn't act that way over there. Why am I acting this way? And for me, it felt like crazy. Like, why am I acting this crazy over here in this part of my life when I wouldn't do it in that part of my life? And I think that disconnect was like, well, screwed. I don't know how to stop yelling and how to act differently. So I'm just going to get some relief from a drink. Does that
Right.
sound like something that's playing out in your head?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's like there's so much guilt that comes from not being able to maintain, my composure at home versus at work. And I feel like the people that are not even my family are getting the best of me. And yet when I come home, there's nothing left. And that brings me so much guilt that I can't be, a good mom, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And that oftentimes hurts, right? It makes us feel sad. It makes us feel disappointed. It makes us feel, for me, it made me feel less than, like how do other women do this and I can't? Or how do other people manage more kids or other things and I can't seem to manage this? Yeah. So
Yes.
when you're thinking about all of that, raising your voice, yelling, and then you want to try to stay calm and you're not, what is in the drink that you're going for? What's the desire that you drink for? Like, what is alcohol going to give you in that moment?
The ability to just let it go, like let things go and whatever I'm trying to control to just not, most of the time it's things that are not, life and death situations. So it's just releasing that need to have control of the situation. And so I think with the kids, they'll keep doing it. But if I'm, have a drink, then it doesn't bother me as much. I don't feel so upset about it
Mm.
anymore.
Hmm. So I just want to repeat back what you said, because I think sometimes when we're talking, we're thinking about what we're saying rather than what actually we just said. So you mentioned you want to learn to let it go, because when you let it go, it doesn't bother you as much. And so you're kind of releasing that need for control. And I think
Right.
that's so critical to know why we drink, right? And this is what I find a lot. Like, people don't say, I desire the taste or I desire this. It's like they want some emotional thing inside of them to change. And I think that's great to recognize. And that's where I want to start. Because then if we know what we're going to the drink for, and we know that emotional shift that we want, we can look at other ways to get it, healthier ways to get it. Yeah. So let's go after that. Let's go after, I want to let it go. I want to lessen my need to control them and lessen my need to yell because I want to control the situation. What other things can you do that would allow you to let it go?
I don't know. I guess that's that's a skill that I need to work on because, working in healthcare, I feel like I have a lot of control over most situations, not whether, how patients do, but, the staff and people listen to what I say and I have control, of many things in my life. And so, with kids, it's just so different because they have their own little minds and needs. And so even though I feel like I know what's best for them, they they don't always agree. And so it's just, I don't have that skill set of like learning to reason with them without getting angry. And I feel like the anger inside of me is uncomfortable. And so that I want to just, get away from that anger right away.
Absolutely. And look what's causing the anger. You can be a superstar at work and I want to make you a superstar in your home life as well. You just need different skills there. And one of the skills is going to be thinking about it differently. Like it's not going to operate as efficiently as a hospital or a job where there's protocols in place. There's people who have jobs, the people who know, the nurse has their job, the pharmacist has their job, the person over there has their job, right? Like people know. Kids don't know they have a job. They just know they're here to play. And when somebody gets in their way of their playing, like they want the toy 100%, and then brother or sister comes along and says, no, I want that toy. They don't know sharing, right? And I know you're teaching this, right? But think about, they don't know their roles, and here they're just here to play. And they're going to struggle to figure out who gets charge of that toy, who doesn't. And they're going to get emotional about it because that's what humans do. We get emotional when we don't get our way, right? You just mentioned you get emotional. You get angry when you don't get to control the situation, right? So I just think it's fun because when we see it in ourselves and we see it in others, it's like, oh yes, this is how humans act when they don't get their way.
Yeah.
So your kids aren't getting their way with their toy or whatever they're bickering. How else can you think about that interaction with your kids rather than I need to control it and I need to stop it?
Yeah, I guess, trying to just let them work it out, or trying to, I don't know. Because sometimes it leads to like, they're like, grabbing it and pulling it away from each other, or they're, screaming and slamming doors, or, being loud, or those things. And so it's hard that's why I don't even know what the right answer is sometimes. So I think that's probably where I struggle.
Yeah. All right. So that's great. I'm glad you gave me that feedback. So let's start with two adults arguing over something. Let's take it out of your kids' context and let's put it into adults. If two adults are arguing over something and say it's a toy, what's the best approach to mediate that? Do you know? Or what's one approach?
Yeah, I'd say, staying calm, talking through the problem, letting each person have a voice in the scenario to work out the difference.
Yeah. As a mediator, I would see if like my husband was arguing with his best friend and they like come to me saying, we can't figure this out. I just say, okay, tell me your side and tell me your side. And I'd make sure that each person was understood. And then I would invite them into where are we going? So you mentioned you have two kids, both the same gender?
Yeah, they're both girls. And
girls. Yeah.
Very emotional.
Of course. And then, there's nothing wrong with being emotional. And I really want to change the viewpoint we have on emotions, because I think when we see other people have emotions, we get uncomfortable with that. And if we don't allow people to express their emotions, then they're going to turn to alcohol, drugs, right? So we've got to let our kids express themselves. Now, I'm not saying, banging their head against a wall is something we shouldn't intervene with, right? Or something that's hurting them, or, if they get physical with each other. I'm not saying just let it go. I'm just saying we have to give them space to express their emotions so they feel safe expressing it and they develop in a healthy way and don't have trauma from it. So we allow them to express themselves. And if you say to your 5 or your 8-year-old, hey, I understand you want to play with this toy. And I understand your sister wants to play with this toy, and then we can say, okay, let's look at something that we create where you can both play with the toy on your own for some alone time, if that's what they want, if they don't want to share. And when you're calm with adults, just like if you're calm with kids, they are more apt to listen. However, if you've been a screamer or a yeller like I was, my daughter almost didn't hear me when I would use a lower voice. So if she didn't listen the first couple of times when I started learning these new techniques, right? Like not yelling, not getting, because she would wait till I would escalate, like get on your shoes for school, nothing. Get on your shoes for school, nothing. Get on your shoes for school. Then it's like, get on your shoes for school. And then she'd get her shoes on for school, right? So she knew she didn't have to act or do anything until my voice went all the way up, because I've trained her that way, right? I would just keep doing that and keep doing that. And so I had to train her to listen to me after the first or second time. And there's definitely a way you can do this. And we could talk more about this, but it's about taking consequences after you've said something and they don't hear you or don't act the way you've asked, that you make the consequence pretty severe, like maybe take the toy away. And you're like, oh, well, you didn't listen to me. You didn't tell me how you were going to play with it. Because an 8-year-old can come up with a solution. Maybe 5, that's a little young. We could try. We could see how she's, reacts. But an 8-year-old certainly could come up with, yeah, well, we'll set a timer, or you could give her ideas. We could set a timer for 5 minutes. Your sister gets it for 5 and you get it for 5. And empowering them to take action when you first say it, or maybe just repeat it one more time and never repeating a third or a fourth, they're going to learn you mean business, because then that toy goes away if they're not willing to comply on the first or second time. But you're not taking 100% control of the situation. You're taking some control, but you're actually giving them some control. And that's what kids really want. They want to feel empowered in their lives. Right? Nobody feels good being disempowered, right? That's why I hate the concept of, you're powerless against alcohol. That to me kept me drinking, right? For me, we like to feel empowered in our lives and using tools like that. So what do you think of this tool that I just talked about? Training them to respond to you when you're calm in the first or second time, and making the consequence for them not listening to be what really changes the wiring of their brain to say, well, mom is operating differently. If I don't respond to the first or second time, I realize I lose all privileges to play with that toy or to do what she said.
It's a very good skill that I probably need to work on. I have had feedback from my husband that has, he said, when you tell the kids something, then a lot of times you either, you give a consequence, but then you don't follow through with a consequence, or, stick with it, what you said. And so he's like, that's why you have problems. And so I've seen that, but I feel like it's still, for some reason, it's still something that I struggle with a lot. So I'm, I definitely think I need to work on that to get better at being able to stick with whatever consequence I say is going to happen.
I love that you recognize that. I love that your husband's a team player and he recognizes that, right? He's trying to help you so you are more calm, so the household is more calm. And I'll tell you, in my boundaries workbook inside of Epic U, I go over these 3 steps. Sounds like you do step 1 and step 2, but step 3 is where it falls apart. And if you don't do the consequence, and I'm not saying like slapping, I mean, I would slap, I would punish, but I realized that didn't work for my child, and nor did I want to be doing that. So I had to look at a different consequence that I was willing to do. But when you do it, even if it feels painful for you or it feels difficult for a couple of times and it works, your brain feels better, their brain feels better, everybody's more calm. And it's like, whoa. And it's just by you doing that step 1 and step 2, which you already do. It's just doing that step 3 that's going to change it. And that's going to have a consequence for you where you're not going to feel like you need so much alcohol. You're not going to feel like you need a drink just to numb it out, to let it go. It's like numbing it out, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So in that scenario, what consequence would feel good for you with your girls?
I don't know, maybe a timeout, or, to just take a step back. Like you said, removing, if it's a toy or some issue like that, removing that as an option for both of them, so that they see if they fight over it, it's going to be, neither of them are going to get to play with it, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think that's very important, to act on it right when you see it, right? Like if they're not coming to the agreement, you just take the toy away. If they are still fighting and you said, hey, we use a lower voice when we talk to people or we talk to each other, we're a family that speaks with love and not, aggression, or however you want to phrase it. And they start speaking that different way, you can remove them, right? Like you said, a timeout, or take them away from the play activity. And then you monitor, right? It's not like when I'm coaching, it's always like, let's try this and see if it works. And we tried a couple of times because the first time we're learning, right? And maybe we didn't execute appropriately. But as we learn, we're getting feedback and we're like, okay, that did work, or that didn't work, or part of it worked, but here's where it didn't work. So I need a different tool when they're not fighting over a toy. What do I do then? Yeah. And if you imagine that playing out, how does that make you feel?
Yes, I feel like when I do have, small times when I am able to handle it like I would like not overreact and stay calm and, you know, come up with a solution that works, I feel so, relieved. At least for the few minutes until the next until the next scenario comes up. But it is such a positive feeling of just knowing that, was able to handle it well on a certain occasion.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's all about making choices, right? We can choose the drink because that's quick, that's easy. We know it works, right? We've done it, it's habit. Or we can choose to up level a skill that we haven't been utilizing, right? And so that might be that step 3 in the boundaries is like actually enforcing the consequence.
Right.
Right. And the good news about doing the latter, enforcing the consequence or up leveling in that, you're no longer needing to escape the family you love and disconnect. They're learning new skills. They're learning how to get along, treat a sibling, listen to mom. And when mom speaks, she means business. So all of that up levels not only your life, but theirs.
Yes. Because I don't want them, like you said, to grow up yelling at people or not knowing how to handle their emotions. And so
Yeah.
I really want to be able to help them learn those skills, but I feel like I haven't mastered them myself. So
Yeah. And managing their emotions is so key because I think a lot of adults can use that tool, right? I know I could have, and I didn't know how with my anger. And so I love just giving them that space. Hey, you're having a lot of high emotions right now. And it's not good to interact with people because you might say things you don't mean. You might yell. Like I would even tell my daughter, like, I used to yell so much and I don't want to be yelling. That's not who I want to be. And that's not really effective. It doesn't feel good in your body when I yell at you, right? And she'd be like, yeah, it feels terrible. And I just want to yell back at you, right? So I would actually acknowledge and own where I wasn't handling my emotions so that I can be an example for her of what I didn't want to do. And I also wanted to show her I don't do life perfectly. And I also wanted to bring awareness to why I wanted it to change because feel that in your body. Does that feel good? Like to yell at somebody or to be yelled at? I don't think it feels good either way. Yeah. So I would honestly have that discussion. And she was 5 or 6 at the time. So likewise with your kids, that they can kind of get it, right? Because they know what feelings feel like. But what kids don't have is language. So you actually speaking that language to them, you are actually causing more or creating more awareness around emotions and giving it the language that they yet don't have. They haven't learned it yet. And anybody can understand when something feels good or something doesn't feel good in the body and say, hey, if you're going to have these emotions, hey, they come up. Sometimes I yell and I don't want to yell. I need to give myself a timeout then. And I'm going to give you a timeout because we just need to separate so we can calm ourselves before we interact with others. And you demonstrating that in the household, they'll like, wow, she's practicing what she preaches. Right? She's talking the talk. She's walking the walk, And I think there's nothing more powerful than to have a leader in the house that actually shows the people they're training or teaching how it's done, right? We could say a lot, but if we don't actually practice it ourselves, they don't learn as quickly. But when we start practicing it ourselves, they learn so much quicker from our behavior and our actions. Yeah.
Yes. Because I see it in the negative perspective, the way that I treat the kids when I get frustrated. I see my older one treating the younger one that same way. Like she has that same reaction that she's seen me do. And that's, so heartbreaking to me that she's learned that bad behavior or bad example from me who, is trying to be the good example, but it's very challenging at times. But I think, like you said, setting the boundaries should hopefully help in following through with the consequences. It's just sticking with that is difficult, but
and I love what you said, sticking with it. It is hard to make new habits. Absolutely. 100%. And for me, it was super hard because how I've been raised was a lot of yelling in our household, right? So I just thought that was normal, but I'm like, but that's not how I want to parent. but I can't seem to shake it out of me. Right. So it is a process of learning. And it is a process where even maybe, starting with yourself, like when I get angry, I'm asking them to change their behavior, but let me start changing my behavior. When I get angry or I start yelling, I'm going to either say, oops, sorry, I started yelling, and start speaking calmly. And if you're so riled up and you can't do that in the moment, you said, I need a timeout, and you go and demonstrate that for them. And they'll be like, wow, that's new. I haven't seen mommy do that, or that's new. And so they'll start to pay attention, because they're always paying attention to what we're doing, what we're saying, particularly what we're doing. We could talk a lot, but kids tune out when they're like, yeah, but you don't do that. Right? I hear what you're saying, but yeah. Yeah. Like when I was telling my daughter to get on her shoes, I'm like, mommy's putting on her shoes. What does that signal to you? So I was training her that I don't always need to say it. Just watch what I'm doing. And when I'm putting on my shoes, we're getting ready to leave the house to take you to school. And that's a time you should be putting on your shoes. Now, it took weeks of doing it, but when they learn it, and you don't have to teach it anymore because it's learned. It's a learned behavior. Yeah. So, Alli, I wanted to ask, what if it is just that easy, that you just need to do step 3 and implement that consequence and follow through on it? What if it was that easy and it would change a lot with your drinking? What if it was that easy?
I really hope it's that easy. My kids are at the age where I think they can start to understand, consequences better than when they were, say, toddlers. But I think, just that daily practice of following through and setting those boundaries and breaking the old habits of yelling and, having them follow that pattern of behavior is challenging to break those cycles of behavior that we've, kind of already set up.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the brain expects mom to act this way. Your brain expects your kids to act this way, right? Dad acts this way, right? And so when I do a big change, I let everybody know. And I almost make it like I'm a judge. And I hit the gavel and I say, okay, team, we are changing it up in this household. Here are the new rules, or here's what we're going to do. I don't like to use rules with kids because they're like, that's boring, right? Rules always sound like punitive. So I say, okay, here's what we're going to do as a family that's going to be different. And I give different actions to myself first. So they're like, oh, it's not just me being bad. They're not just punishing me. Oh, mommy's going first. Okay. So, and I present it in a good way. I present it in an energetic, good way. Mommy is done yelling. I don't like it. I don't like the mom that I'm showing up as. I don't like how I feel. I don't like how it probably makes you feel. And I'm done doing it. And so they get excited. My husband's like, what's going on? Right. Or I might tell him beforehand. And then I say, Dad, this is what you're going to do. Right. And then I say, kids, this is what's going to happen and what you're going to do. And we're going to all do this because we're going to feel better and be together and more bonded as a family. And I wouldn't use bonded with kids. Let's see. I'd say we're going to have more love for each other as a family. And if you present it in this excited way, and it's like a declaration, like on this day, things are changing. And even if they falter or your husband falters, you can't. You stick to it as much as you can, because they're going to sense that you mean business. And then when you start showing up differently, they're going to start showing up differently. And you're going to expect them to show up differently. And if they don't, there's a consequence. So I love making it a bold statement, getting it out in the open, getting everybody on board in the household. And even if dad's role doesn't change, just make it sound like it slightly changes, just so it sounds like, oh, we are all doing this. And it's not punitive. It's not that I'm a bad person. It's not that mom expects me to change, but there's nothing going to be happening different with them.
Yeah, I think that's a really exciting thing to think about, because I know when I listen to your podcast, that's how it makes me feel, like this is a good, exciting thing to try to change. And so I feel like for them, they love, new, exciting things, so that, if I am able to portray it in that way, I think that could really, be effective.
Yeah. Yeah. And then always looking to do that positive reinforcement when they actually do it differently. Or when, the first time your 5 or 8-year-old says, Mom, I'm feeling like I need a timeout because of my energy. Or my daughter would say, Mom, I'm going to put on my shoes because I see you putting on your shoes. And I'd be overjoyed. And I'd create a little dance party for it, right? Woohoo, you did it. Awesome. And we do this little dance party and you make it positive. That's inviting people into change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rather than like, oh, I have to do this. Right. It's like, that's what I work towards, right? Making change in your drinking positive rather than, oh, I have to drink less. Cause it does feel like such a slog, especially if we don't know how it's going to look on the other side. And so if you're portraying how it's going to look on the other side for your kids and it's positive, they're going to want to embrace that change even more. And so will you. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. When I do something positive and it turns out well and I'm not drinking, it feels, very good. For sure.
Yeah. And that's the life we want to create for ourselves, right? A really good one. And I call it epic. It just feels good to be alive and doing life and feeling like you're doing well at it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I love it that you came on the show, Alli, to just help our listeners, to help yourself, right? To improve so that we have less reliance on alcohol. Anything else for me, Alli, today?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Again, thank you for coming on the show. So great to help you. So great to meet you. And let's stay in touch about how you are implementing the consequences and the boundaries.
Thank you so much.
Well, that was a sample of a coaching session, and I ended it a little early to keep it in the timeline for this podcast. But notice how I think for us moms, we have to navigate conflict with the kids that we have, right? Conflict between siblings, conflict that we find that is challenging after a hard day's work. And it becomes so challenging when we are emotionally charged. And I think it's so helpful to know we're not going to do it perfectly all the time, but it's important to recognize when we're emotionally fired up and that's causing us to do things that we don't want, like overdrink or yell at our kids. And what I love about coaching so much is about where you're at now and where you want to go. We don't have to go into the deep past if it doesn't apply or it's not relevant. And it's also taking into consideration what other people and how they're going to benefit from the tools that we implement. Right? We want to make sure that everybody in the household is winning, not just the mom, not just the kids, but everybody in the household is winning. Because we know conflict is going to happen. We know siblings are going to fight. But yelling and numbing and wanting to check out of it doesn't help anybody. Doesn't help the mom, doesn't help the kids, doesn't help the marriage, doesn't help the family unit. And if we play out this scenario and don't do anything about it, just think of what years and years and years of overdrinking, yelling does to the family over time. This is why I believe coaching is so important. Making these small tweaks to how we show up in our lives changes how much we love our lives, improves our lives, improves the lives of others, particularly the people closest to us. So thank you, Alli, so much for coming on the show. Thank you so much for being willing to be coached and not knowing what to expect and what questions were going to come. And I really appreciate how much this podcast is going to help other women navigate the stress of raising kids in their own lives. All right, my beautiful friends, I love you all, and I will see you next week. If you want to change your relationship with alcohol and with yourself, then come check out Epic You. It's where you get individualized help mastering the tools so you can become a woman who can take it or leave it and be in control around alcohol in any situation. Epic You is the place for women who want to be healthy, confident, and empowered to accomplish their goals and live their best life. Come join us over at epicu.com/epicu. That's epicu.com/EPICYOU. I can't wait to see you there.